Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I'm your host, MGCovers. This is episode 47. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in on a Monday morning. If you're listening on the replay on Apple Podcast or Spotify, I greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. And while we're thinking about that, mentioning Spotify and Apple, if you would give me a review and screenshot that and send it to me, I will give you a gift, so to speak. It might be a line, might be some of my proprietary content, or maybe even a coaching video if you're not a client. So greatly appreciate you guys doing that and giving me 5 stars on Apple. All right, so let's talk about big Super Bowl yesterday, which is going to dominate the majority of this podcast. We're going to take the Super Bowl and use it as a teaching point. A lot of great teaching points, especially if you desire to become a professional handicapper or you just desire to be a better handicapper. Great teaching points that we can take from that Super Bowl. We'll do a recap. I'm doing my recaps a little bit different now, and we'll explain that when we get there. Made some model changes with NHL. That's one of my fortes as a handicapper, being able to adjust on the fly in the middle of a season. Made some great changes to NHL. I'll share that, and also update NCAA basketball, which we made changes to last week. We're going to view our resident handicapper, Eric. We'll talk about his UFC model. He's off to a really good start. We're going to talk about ELF spaces briefly. If you don't know, ELF is a handicapper, and he hosts these Twitter spaces at night. He has professionals on and a lot of amateurs and a lot of people that claim to be professionals but really aren't, that get exposed on these spaces. I'll give one example. I'm going to make a separate video about this and use it as a teaching point because it's really good content. So I don't want to share everything. I'll save that for a separate video I'm going to make this week. And then, of course, the majority of this podcast, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl and a lot of mistakes people made when handicapping that. So let's dive into sort of our recap. Let's see here. All right. Now, what we're going to do as far as like the recaps, I'm going to show, I'm going to do a monthly recap so you can see. If you watched it last week, this is basically the same thing. I'm going to update it each month. The reason I'm doing this is I think that I don't want people to focus on, the majority of people in this business or potential clients are ignorant. So they focus on like the daily. If they see a handicapper, this guy's 7-3, they deem that guy as successful, where I want to retrain the market. So where they focus on a long-term focus, because in the first starting point of looking at long-term success would be monthly. So through January, 4.14 units. We'll update it at the end of February and show you where we are there. And if you're new, this was last year. Whoops. Let me pull this up. I don't know if I have it on here. Let's see. 2024. Yep. 2024 up 47.04 units. And as always, the definition of success in sports betting, the only definition of success in sports betting is, can you win long-term? Majority of people cannot. There's only 5% of the people that wager on sports can win long-term. Takes no talent to have a winning day. So having a focus on, a daily or even a weekly summary is basically insignificant. So that's going to be the change that we make. We are going to talk about the models, which will bring me into the second part, and I'll show you the college basketball model. Now, we didn't wager on this because, again, this was relatively new, but the success we've had with this is just unbelievable. So since 2-1, basically the start of February through yesterday, the model has gone 39 and 81, up 19.85 units, which is insane. And even if you take that winning day 15.5 units on, that was a Saturday, and even if you truncate it down to say like 5, it would still be a very successful model. And what's interesting about this, a teaching point to take away from this, if you told people I'm 39, if you see a model that's 39 and 81, would that be a successful model? Most people would say no, because it, quote, doesn't look right. And even though it's hitting 32%, it's extremely, extremely profitable. And a lot of it has to do with, the variance that you have in NCAA basketball. It's cashed some really big dogs, plus 400, a plus 500 dog. And so when you have that And, it's all about expected value. Whatever your break-even point is, if your average odds are above that, it's going to be profitable. Simple as that. So interesting that this has had success. I'm going to still track this basically to the end of the year, because this could be something we could potentially use for next year as well. I think it would be, even if it's profitable now here in February, I'm almost certain that it would be profitable in, say, like December and January. So super excited about this. And you can see I won't talk about them, but you can see the plays there for today if you're watching this on YouTube. All right. And then next, I want to look at this, take a peek at NHL, which I made a lot of changes to. And this is fascinating as well. Okay. So NHL, I don't have that tracker. I think I had made some changes to this, and I was playing top 10 teams via my quote old model. And I think it had went 38 and 32. So it was positive, right? However, I didn't like the way I was handicapping. I was doing some situational handicapping, looking at goalies. I was factoring in some line movement as well. And again, the premise of what I do is I want to be as model dependent as I possibly can and independent of everything else, which means I want to be primarily what the marketplace refers to, or as the sports betting space refers to, as a bottom-up bettor, which means I'm just solely focused on the model. And I think majority of time, the success I've had in the last 2 years has been a model that I've created where it basically stood on its own, and we didn't factor in any situational angles, whether that was injuries, line movement, form, etc. And we'll show Eric's UFC model, and his is 100% plug and play. And that's generally the term that I use. If you hear people say originate, I originate, that's the same as building models. If you hear people say bottom up, that's the same thing. And then you'll hear me say plug and play, which basically you run the model, whatever the model tells you to play, that's what you play. Now, if you look at this, what I thought was what I've learned about, playing underdogs, you can have a very low win percentage, but still be extremely profitable, and in many ways more profitable and having higher ROI than you would wagering, quote, traditionally, which mean that, probably majority of favorites sprinkled in with some dogs. But this is what I came up with. I went and back tested. I took this old model and I started back testing it from, I think, beginning of January. And so the criteria this was something I did in baseball. So what I did, let me explain what I did in baseball and tell you how I transfer this over to NHL. So baseball model, this was for the 2023 season. I played the top 10 teams via the model that were plus 120 or greater odds, and only played them if they were not playing another team in the top 10. So it's what I call a margin concept. So we're just, if the model that you created is based on stats that correlate to winning, then the teams at the top of that model should win at a higher percentage than the teams at the bottom of that model. And if you play against the teams at the bottom, that's a concept I call the play against concept. So, and if you're going to play dogs, you're probably going to cash more dogs in the top 10, right? Because these teams are, quote, good teams. And many times they're playing each other in NHL. So what I did was, in Major League Baseball, I wouldn't play it if they were playing another team in the top 10. But with this NHL model, the way I back tested it, I tried it both ways. It was extremely profitable just playing any top 10 team that was plus 120 or greater. And you can see I started on January the 1st, and you can see the line. So if it was a loss, basically -1, you could see there a 2.6, 1.3. So basically a plus 133, a plus 176, plus 160, a plus 219, plus 162. So still getting some really, really good numbers there. And through February the 8th, it's gone 22 and 17, which is 55%, up 16.82 units, which is an insane ROI. So really, really excited about this. And considering it's February and it's having this success, again, back to the point I made with NCAA basketball, I think this is something that we could incorporate into the beginning of NHL season as well. And if you really want to aspire to be better, you should be testing and running as many different models that you can handle. So even if you don't have an NHL model, you could be testing this. You could be basically back testing it daily. You could run the model and see if it's profitable, and then make changes on the fly and continue to test that daily. You should be doing that for NBA, NHL, even if you don't have a model. And then if you've never handicapped MLB, same thing. When MLB season rolls around, it's something very simple you can do. Run your model, see the results daily, make adjustments. And I've perfected and made a lot of tweaks to models that ended up being successful by doing that. So really excited about this model long term. I'm actually going to wager this. Unfortunately, NHL is on a international break, which is very interesting. I don't know if they did this last year. They won't play until February the 22nd. So they basically have almost 2 weeks off, but super excited about the changes we made there. All right, next, let's move on. Let's look at Eric's UFC model. Eric is our resident handicapper for UFC. I'll show you, if you're new, I'll show you last year's record here real quick. He hit 34.91 units last year, 67%. Now, he plays a lot of heavy favorites, but it works. And again, going back, it's not something that I personally do, but going back to the premise of defining success in sports betting, can you profit long-term? And he does. And still, even playing those heavy juice, you can see average odds currently year-to-date minus 122. I think last year he averaged minus 144. So all you have to do is find the probability of minus 122, which is probably going to be around, I think that's going to be around, 50? Let's see. Let me see if I can pull this up, and I'll show you what I mean. Money line conversion chart. I'm Googling, and we'll pull this up in just a second. I'll show you what I mean. If you're new, this is a good teaching point as well. Okay, Key, you see on the screen, so basically what we do is we take 122 and convert it into a probability. So there you go. So 122 is what his average odds are. So that's between 54 and 55%. So in order to just to break even, he has to hit 54 to 55% just to break even, okay? So anything above that would be profitable. Anything at that would be even, and then anything below that, he would be basically losing. So we come back to his log, and we can see that he's hitting 68%. So the break-even point is 55%, average odds minus 122. He's hitting 68%, so therefore he is profitable and currently up 4.18 units, 11-5, which is really, really good. He's got a really, really solid model. And so big shout out and congrats to him. And we actually offer access to this model. I post this on Instagram. We have a free play that we'll release today for next week's card. If you want access to his weekly card, you can get that. And you could also hop on for a 6-month package. And I post that on Instagram as well. So big shout out to him. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about these ELF spaces, which have become sort of the talk of the sports betting space. ELF is a handicapper that hosts Twitter spaces. If you don't know what a Twitter space is, it's basically like a group chat where people can chat on Twitter. He brings on professional handicappers and brings on people that are posing as professional handicappers, and more times than not, they get exposed on these ELF spaces. And you even had Spanky, who is well respected in this industry as a sharp, sent out a tweet that you should not buy picks from any handicapper. And even though I do offer my services, it's more than just picks. In a lot of ways, I do agree with him. The industry right now is at an all-time low. And it's unfortunate that it's got to this point, but the fault and blame, this is a very important point, is not to be put on these people that are offering these fraudulent handicappers. The reason why they exist is because the majority of people, and I've said this a gazillion times, I have to keep preaching this, the majority of people that invest in sports are ignorant. They have no clue what they're doing. So you have these people that don't know what success looks like. And when they see somebody post, hey, we're on a 9-2 run, to them, because they're uneducated, that looks like success to them. They do not know that in reality, this person, there's only a 5% chance that this person wins long term. And the majority of people, more than likely, that are offering their services online, on Twitter, wherever, are losing handicappers. And just to make a point, I'm going to make a separate video about this, but let's take a look at this. This was from, I'm not sure who sent this DM to this handicapper, but Elf posted this. And it was somebody sending a tweet to Big Board Bets. And you can see there's 71,000 followers. And I've got like 2,500, almost 3,000 subs on YouTube. And I'll talk about why that's significant here in a second. And here's the DM. Hey man, I see your account everywhere right now. Is there somewhere I can check out your profit to loss data before I join up? I appreciate it. Look at his response. I don't keep a detailed account for it. It's all just word of mouth. If people want to join, they can. So there is a 99.99% chance that this gentleman does not win long term. Because if he could turn a profit long term, would he not post that and be proud of that and display that? Yeah, absolutely. But the reason there is no tracking or no long-term tracker that shows success is he does not win long-term. That's just the reality of it. And if you actually go to his profile, and this is kind of sad. This is really sad. He says professional prop expert, subscribe to my dub club. And most people that have dub clubs are, majority of those are fraudulent cappers, because the reason I say fraudulent, there's no way to look at they don't have anywhere you can go on the website and see any kind of long-term success. And going back to me, now, if you go to my website, go to MGCovers.com, and there's something that says betting log. All that information I showed you at the beginning of the podcast is there. But again, there's no record of any kind of success. And I have finally accepted that this is the way that it is. And even though I'll never be as big as these people, and these fraudulent handicappers will probably end up making more money than I do on that side of the business. Obviously, if they're losing, they're not making any money in sports betting long term. But I've just accepted that that's the reality. And then the way that I want to run my business is there's some ethics behind it as well. And so, I could structure, my site to where I'm, only showing a winning day, which is what a majority of these do, and to kind of like almost mislead people in a way and focus more on the daily. But I just don't want to do that. I'd rather, I've always been a truth seeker in how I've approached this business and how I've offered my services to the public. I want to be transparent and honest and teach people the right way to do it, because more times than not, the majority of people that come over to my side that become clients are people that genuinely want to learn the business and get better. That is the profile of the person that comes a part of the MGCovers team. I have it's probably almost 200 coaching videos on the site, so they get access to all that. In addition to all my lines every day, and if they want to, and that's like $50 a month. And if they want to get access to my plays, they can. That's $100 a month, and then you can join for an entire year for $4.99. And there's a link to join in the description of this video if you want to do that. But I'm not changing that, and I want to make it affordable for everybody. And that's another problem with a lot of these handicappers. They're charging just crazy amounts of money. So in essence, you have all of these ignorant. This is the sports betting space. You have all of these people that are ignorant, that want winning sports betting picks, are buying from people that are losing handicappers that have no clue what they're doing. And that's the industry. That's where we're at. That's where the majority are in this business. And I've come to a point to where I just have to accept that that's the way it is. And I heard Grant Cardone say one time, you don't have to, and this is sad, but even what he said was very true. He said, Grant Cardone's a real estate mogul. You don't have to be the best. You just have to be the loudest. And it's so true. And that's why if a lot of people lead with, showing cash, or they're showing like a rented Airbnb house or a Lamborghini, a picture of them in a rented Lamborghini, or et cetera, or whatever. more times than not, that's definitely a sign and trait of a fraudulent handicapper. Okay. All right. So enough. Let's dive on to the big bad Super Bowl. The line closed at Kansas City -1, and Philadelphia won in a blowout 40-22. I sent out my model. If you follow me on Twitter, don't forget to do that. And let me pull up my profile so you can see the line here. Let's pull it up. Where's it at? MG. Can't remember where I had it. All right, there it is. Yeah, I sent this out. This was on February the 5th. Line for Super Bowl's up. We have Philadelphia -3. This is straight from the model, so nobody has factored into it at all. Thoughts, we'll post past Super Bowl models in the comments. So the Super Bowl model I had that I've ran for years was Philadelphia -3, and that was the reason why we played it. And obviously Philadelphia won in a blowout. Now, a lot of good teaching points from this Super Bowl, and I want to start with this. Now, for the overwhelming majority, now, I'm not going to talk about recreational use, meaning like, or somebody that's looking at sports betting recreational, meaning they're just having fun and they're like, hey, I like Kansas City or I like Philadelphia in this one. We're talking about from an educational perspective, from how you should approach this if you aspire to improve your handicapping. So for the majority of people, do not have a model for sports handicapping. Let's establish that. And I think everybody would agree with that. Most people, even if you want to get better, and even if you don't have a model, I'm going to show you how you should approach this game. And this is what I teach. So you have no model. So if you have no model, we have to look at the information that is available to us. And for most people, that's the line. So this is from sportsbookreview.com. 56% of the ticket count was on Kansas City. Now, this is going to vary. There's a lot of controversy surrounding betting splits. 44% of the ticket count was on Philadelphia. I ran it I showed Bet Online, which I'm going to show here in a second. But at the end of the day, Kansas City was, quote, the public team. And what I mean by public team, that means the overwhelming majority was playing Kansas City. However, the line opens at 2, and I think the day before, I think this was Saturday, that line moved to 1. There was a quote on Twitter from Jeff Benson. He said, we received a significant bet on Philadelphia. So what that means was they had a sharp bet that came in on Philadelphia. So they moved the line. So they moved the line to incentivize people to play Kansas City. Now, I'll talk about sports books here in a second. So if we just look at, if you don't have a model, and this is all the information you have, this is 1,000% a play for Philadelphia. Kansas City is a public team. If you do what the majority of people that wager on sports lose money long-term, if you do what the public does, you'll lose long-term as well. So Philadelphia was the non-public team. You've heard fade the public. This is a classic example of that. My next question would be for Kansas City backers. And again, we're not talking about somebody that had a model or somebody that's a professional handicapper that maybe had model Kansas City -6 and they play Kansas City. That's different. But we're just focused on the information that we have in front of us. Kansas City's a public team. Opened at -2, closed at -1. If it was such a good wager to play Kansas City, why did the line move against them from open to close? Great question. So I think a majority of people played Kansas City, and I heard this a lot. The buzz was, I don't want to wager against Patrick Mahomes. Now, again, I'm not picking on people for playing Kansas City, so we all take losses. But if your handicapping was, I don't want to wager against Patrick Mahomes, I don't want to bet against Chiefs, they've won 2 Super Bowls in a row, that's not handicapping. That's just not handicapping. Okay? Because in order to handicap this outside of the information I just showed you, you have to have a sports betting model or a line. And if you don't have that, then it would default to just using the information that you have in front of you. Okay? And that being said, my model was, Philadelphia -3. So if the line had moved in favor of Kansas City, I still would have played Philadelphia. I always play the Super Bowls, right? And then I had a lot of confidence in that model. The last 4 years, the model's gone 2-1. And then the year that it had no value, we had, I think, Rams -3. The book line was -4. The game ended Rams -3. The model nailed it on the exact number. So again, the teaching point of this is, if you don't have a model, then you have to use the information that you have. And, I don't want to wager against Patrick Mahomes. That's not sound. That's not fundamentally sound handicapping. Okay. And so that would so if that's not handicapping, the only thing you can use is the information that's in front of you. Now let's take a look at, this is from Dave Mason. This is, he's the rep for BetOnline that sort of represents BetOnline. BetOnline is an offshore book if you've never heard of them. And he lists I'm not sure if this is, I think this is money, meaning like this is not ticket count. This is the percentage of money, meaning at -1, 55% of the money is on KC. 54% of the money is on KC -116, 65% on the over. Parlays, 69% is on the KC spread, 55% KC money line, 68% on the over. Teasers, 71% on Philadelphia, 73% on the over. He posts this GIF that says "Go Birds." Pretty funny. So it was obvious that the book needed Philadelphia, and this is an important lesson as well. We've often heard that books want 50-50 action. They want balanced action, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is books don't want to have a liability, meaning if this team wins, they have a huge liability. And if they do have a liability, very important, if the sports books have a liability, they are going to be on the sharp side. The sharp side was Philadelphia. The public side was Kansas City, meaning the books needed Philadelphia to win. And again, if you have no model and you just want to improve your handicapping, especially in a big game like this is different than a game that has a college basketball game, Longwood versus College of Charleston. There's not going to be enough money, or not going to be as much money poured into that game as a Super Bowl. So therefore, we can't really look at the public betting splits, are not going to be as accurate, and the line movement will not be as accurate as a Super Bowl, because there is a ton of money, millions of dollars poured into the Super Bowl pool. So therefore, another lesson we can take, what did the books need? The books needed Philadelphia. So when in doubt, if you have no other information, then you side with what the books need. Books needed Philadelphia. Now, again, let me say this. If you had a model, right, and your model had KC -5 or KC -6 or whatever, and that was the reason you played, then that was the correct way to play it. And if that model for you had showed success in the past, then the way you handicapped or played that game was correct. But what you have to understand is there's only two ways to handicap. You have, a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach. So if you're using line movement, you have to handicap the game the way I showed you at the beginning of this rant or educational teaching point. And if you have a model, you basically do what I did. Or a lot of times I've created models to where we look for the model to establish value, and then we use line movement as a trigger point. You could have played it that way, meaning like I could have said, okay, model says Philadelphia -3, the line moves against us, it's a no play. That itself would have been better than simply playing KC with no model and ignoring the betting split and the line movement as well. So hopefully that is a good lesson in understanding that. And now I want to dive briefly into the stat side of this. The most undervalued stat in the NFL right now, and again, this is sort of the premise of how I build models too, is that when you're building models, you want to find a stat that correlates to winning, number one. And number two, if you can find a stat that correlates to winning and is undervalued in the marketplace, perfect scenario. The most undervalued stat in this game was the Philadelphia defense. And what defense in the NFL opponents averaged the least amount of points against this team? Drumroll, Philadelphia Eagles. For 2024, Philadelphia allowed 18.1 opponent points per game. That was the lowest average of any NFL team. How many talking points did we hear about the Philadelphia defense this past week? None. Kansas City average given up the last 3 games. Now, this includes their last game, which they basically played reserves, but they were averaging giving up 27 points. Now, again, of course, they had reserves, but even that would still concern me. So your reserves against the Denver team gave up 27. And I think they blew out Houston, and I can't remember who the amount they gave up previously. But again, the main point would have been the fact of how good this Philadelphia defense was, and it got way undervalued. Let's go back to last year. All the talk was about San Francisco offense. All of the weapons they had more weapons. They scored 1 touchdown in the Super Bowl. That's it. And the better defense was Kansas City, right? Let's go back to the Tom Brady Super Bowl when he played against the Chiefs. All the talk was, hey, this Kansas City team could potentially blow out Tampa. That was the talking point. And you know what happened in that game? Tampa got blown out. And I want to close with this as far as like Patrick Mahomes. A lot of people have said, hey, well, Patrick Mahomes is 3-1 in Super Bowls. If you understand regression, so if he's 3-1 in Super Bowls, let's talk about regression. Regression means, okay, if you flip a coin, it's 50%. If you flip a coin 10 times and it lands on tails 7 out of 10, if you keep flipping that coin, it's going to eventually even out. I mean, it's going to land on heads more. That's just probability how it works. If Patrick Mahomes is 3-1 in the Super Bowl, or forget Patrick Mahomes, anybody that's 3-1 sports betting, and we have to pick between these two options. If somebody's 3-1, their next wager, are they more likely to go 4-1, or are they more likely to go 3-2, or end up, meaning like, are they more likely to lose the next wager or win the next wager? Based on stats and probability, if somebody's 3-1, they're more likely to go lose that next wager and go 3-2 as opposed to 4-1. That's just probability and how it works. Tom Brady lost 3 Super Bowls. He was 7-3 in the Super Bowl, and probably going down as the best quarterback of all time, but he still lost 3 Super Bowls, right? So my point is just because somebody has won the previous 2, or there was another good point I heard. Oh, this was from a handicapper that's not good. They said that this was Columbus Blue Jackets. This was NHL, but another good example of this. Columbus had not won a game on the road all year. I think that was the stat. They had not won a game all year on the road. And so that was their whole basis of handicapping them, right? Handicapping against them. And of course, they ended up winning. Oh, I know what it was. No, take that back. Columbus Blue Jackets had not won on a back-to-back ever. For the whole season, they had not won on a back-to-back. So, whatever, they were 0-7 on a back-to-back for the entire season. So if you understand stats, what's most likely to happen? Is it more likely for them to go 0-8, end up 0-8, or is it more likely for them to end up 1-7? Statistically speaking, it's more likely for them to actually win that next one. Why? Based on regression. At some point, it's going to regress back to that. And that's a big mistake people make in understanding regression. It's the same reason when you'll see a handicapper advertise, man, we're on a hot streak, 15-5. You should fade his next 20 picks. Because if a handicapper's gone 15-5, he's not going to go 15-5 on the next 20 picks. He's probably going to regress below 50% on the next 20. That's the most probable outcome. So anyway, so hope that helps. And that concludes this podcast. A long one, but a good one, and greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. Don't forget, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and we'll talk to you guys this week. Peace.